Welcome back, guys. Jimmy Jules 153 here again with another episode of Short Circuits. Today we'll be going over how to build a basic UI. We'll go over a few elements. We've got our lives up the top left of the screen, a timer at the top right, a directional compass that shows you which way to go and takes you towards your objective. We've got our leveling system down the bottom that's slowly increasing experience and leveling up as well. And then finally down the bottom right, we've got our currency. So we'll be going through how to make each of these things in this video. Because we'll be making this a 3D UI with things other than text gadgets, this will only work if we have a camera gadget. If we don't have a camera gadget, we'll have nothing to group the rest of the logic to, and the 3D elements that we're going to be adding to the UI. So we've put down a microchip just on a block here, and we'll put a camera on that microchip as well. And we'll just push that past the point where we can see the block. And this will be our camera rig. Now we want this camera rig to follow our player. So first of all, we'll need a player. We'll grab out a blank deluxe puppet. And we'll jump into the logic of this puppet. Remove the follow and the win behavior. Now we'll need something for our camera to track. So we'll grab out a tag. And we'll just name this player. Just like so. And we'll want to make sure that the origin of this tag, so the little dot, is in the direct center of the puppet. So we'll turn on our precise move, just so that we can keep it restricted to 2 planes, and move that into the direct center of the puppet like so. This will stop the tag orientation from rotating as the puppet rotates. It'll stay in the direct center. Now to keep up with our player, we'll use a teleporter gadget. And we'll tell this teleporter to look for the player tag that we've just placed on our puppet. We'll want to make sure that the match target position is enabled, but not the match target orientation. This will make sure it follows our player, but doesn't rotate to its orientation. We also won't want the teleporter to be directly on top of the puppet, like it is there. We'll also want to make this block not collidable so that it doesn't run into our puppet. You can see at the moment it's directly on top of the puppet like so. We'll be making a bit of an isometric view for this one, so we'll want our camera on a top-down angle. We'll drag it out a little bit and up. Just to say about there. We'll pause the game and angle the entire block to about 25 degrees. Then if we jump into play mode, we'll be able to see about how far off we are, and we are fairly off. So we will rotate this a little further. And you can see that rotating this has thrown off our teleporter orientation as well, so we'll need to readjust this. And I'm pretty happy with that. So now we have our camera rig with a teleporter on it so that it follows our player. Now that we've got our camera following our player, we can make an experience and leveling system. What we'll be making here is a system that increases the amount of experience required after each level. So let's say, for example, at level 1, you'll need 120 experience to level up, and then on level 2, you'll need 140, and that just increases. So if we think about what we'll need to keep track of those XP and leveling numbers, we'll use a variable for this. We'll name this one XP. And we'll want our minimum experience to be 0, and our maximum experience to be basically as high as it can be, like so. We'll also need a level variable, which holds our player level. And we will need a few calculators for this, so I'll grab out one to clone for later. We'll also need some variable modifiers to modify the two variables that we've made here. And just to make things nice and easy to read, we'll also use some value sliders so you can see the numbers. So for our first value slider, we'll have this hold the amount of experience required to level. Then for our next value slider, we'll have this hold the additional experience. So we're going to set our initial experience required to level to 100. And our additional experience required to level to 20. So we've got our level variable here and our amount of experience required to level. And so let's say our base amount of experience will be 100 to level up, and then each additional level will add 20 experience onto that. So initially, we'll want to work out how much experience extra we need to be adding to the base. For this, we'll use a multiplying calculator, and we'll be multiplying our level by the amount of additional experience. So if we're at level 1, you'll need 20 extra experience, so that'll be 120. If you're at level 2, it'll be 40 additional experience, so you'll need 140. I'll show you this in just a moment. I've just gone and set our level variable minimum and initial value to 1, so that we start out at level 1 rather than level 0. We'll duplicate our calculator here and change this to add, and we'll basically want to add our level times the additional experience to the base experience. This will give us the total amount of experience that we require to level up. Now we need to work out whether we have more experience than the experience required to level. So we have our experience required to level, and if our total experience is greater than that value, then we've leveled up. So we can grab our variable modifier here and make this the level variable, and make that add 1 to our level. So now each time we get more experience than we need to level, it'll level us up. We'll also want to reset our experience back to 0 so that we can start that over again. So we'll reset our experience level as well. So just to show you how this works, I've just set up a little thing here just to add to the experience that we have. So you can see at the moment that we require 120 experience to level up. At the moment, we have 90 experience. And you see it got to 120 and then went over and reset our level. It's increased our level variable to 2, and we now need 140 experience for the next level. This is almost great, but the experience amount had to go over 120 before we leveled up, and we really want that to happen when it hits 120. So for this, we'll add in one more calculator, and we'll change this to a subtraction, and we'll just make this subtract 0.01, and we'll use that value instead. So basically now if it's greater than 139.99 or 140 or above, it will activate these. So you can see now, as soon as it hits 120, it levels us up and increases the amount required to level up. Now we'll want some sort of indicator towards our progress for our leveling, and we'll also want an on-screen indicator for our level as well. So for our progress of the level, we'll use a fleck, and we'll grab out the ruler and make sure it's on the grid. Just make this nice and tiny and draw out a line like so. And that will be all we need for this. We'll get this out of the way. So we'll drag this in front of our camera block. Jump into play mode and back into edit mode so that we get the correct camera angle. And we'll just center this fleck to about there or so. Make it a bit shorter. And just make sure it's in the middle. Now we'll jump into the tweak menu for the painting and make this a little bit thicker with some clones. We'll turn the spread right down so they're nice and close together. And just increase that a tiny bit, just to spread it apart. We'll make our experience bar yellow, just like that. And we'll make it a bit glowy, just so it's nice and easy to see. And that's perfect. We'll want to have a copy of this fleck. I'll turn on the grid and just make an exact copy in the exact same location as well. And we'll make this one black. So this will be our empty bar, and this will be our full bar. We'll select the two bars and the camera block rather, and we'll group these three things together. Now, because we've grouped these three things together, it's placed this microchip inside the group. That's not at all what we want, because that will only transport or teleport this camera block that it's stamped to. We want it to teleport the entire group. So we'll grab onto this microchip, hold L1 and scope out with circle, and then let go of everything again. And then our microchip will be stamped to the group rather than just the camera block. So you can see down the bottom here, we've got our experience bar, and it's not doing anything at all at the moment. So let's get that changed. So we'll scope back into our camera group, and we'll make sure we select our yellow bar, because that's going to be the one we want to modify. And we'll be using the signals from our chips here to modify that. So we need to work out what the difference is between the experience and the amount of experience we require. So to work that out, we'll just divide the two numbers. And that will give us a number between 0 and 1, corresponding to how far through we are leveling. We'll plug our experience into the port A of the calculator and the amount of total experience we need to level up into port B. If we hit play just with a value slider hooked up to that value, you can see that we're getting a number between 0 and 1 that represents how far through leveling we are. With this signal, we'll grab out a keyframe, and we'll be changing the endpoint of our fleck here from the third tab. So with this keyframe, we want to ensure that the endpoint is at 100%. When this keyframe is not active, we want the endpoint to be 0. So initially, when we have no experience, it's going to start out with an endpoint of 0, and then as we level up, it'll increase to 100%. Now we'll plug this calculator into our keyframe here, and you can see already, because we've got 10 experience and we need 120 to level, it's giving a signal of 8% to our endpoint slider here. If we press play, you can see the endpoint is increasing the bar until we've completely leveled up. Then it resets with the new experience requirements, and then starts counting up again. If you wanted to make this look a little bit nicer, you could even add some slow power up time to the keyframe, so that it slowly increases, as opposed to flicking up. You don't really want to add any slow power downtime, because then it will take time to decrease, and you really want it to disappear immediately. We'll also add a level indicator. For this, we're just going to use a number displayer that's hooked directly up to our level variable, and we'll keep that in the bottom middle. If we press play now, that's obviously in the middle of the bar, which is not where I want it. I'll put it just above. Turn on the precise move. Move that up, like so. So you can see we've now got our progress bar and our level. We'll also just add a little bit of flair to the level up, just to make it a bit more impactful. We'll add a timeline to our level up signal. So this calculator here is telling us when we're leveling up, and we want this timeline to play once we've leveled up. For this, we'll just want to show the word level and then the number of the level that they've reached. So we'll grab out a text displayer and a number displayer, and we'll need to grab the level variable. So we'll grab a variable modifier and put that on the get option, and we'll tell that to get the level variable. And we'll pump that directly into the number displayer. And finally, we'll grab out a keyframe. So we'll select our number and our text displayers at the same time so we can modify them both. We'll make the text white. We'll turn the background off and the border and the shadow as well. And while we're at it, we'll just make the font something different than default, like so. And we'll drag these probably into the center of the screen. So we'll align these to the middle, vertically that is, not horizontally. And we'll just center those so that they're in about the center of the screen. We'll also just make sure that our number displayer is aligned to the left. This will make sure that our numbers expand out to the right. Now with our keyframe, we'll grab these two again and make sure that the opacity is turned all the way up with the keyframe. But by default, we want the opacity to be 0. This will mean that the text will fade in. If we pull our little knob up the top there, you can see our keyframe will now fade in. And if we clone this, just so that we keep the opacity for the text boxes, we'll also add some brightness into this keyframe. So we'll increase this to about 10%, let's say. And we'll add a transition in here as well. And we'll make that fade out finally. So basically what this is doing, it's fading in our text with some brightness, and then it gets rid of the brightness over a short amount of time, and then it gets rid of the opacity once more again as this keyframe turns off. So now if we jump into play mode, you can see that timeline will activate whenever we level up and give us a little progress. So that's all we need for our XP and leveling system. For the next setup, we'll make some lives for the character. For this system, we'll use a counter to keep track of our lives. And we'll start off with 3 lives. And we'll of course want this to be full, because we'll be starting with 3 lives and not with 0. We'll grab another variable here, and I'll show you what this will do in just a moment. But we'll also grab out a selector. Now with this selector, we'll be using the active port option. Basically what this does is it will activate a specific port on the selector based on the signal it receives. So let's say it's receiving a signal of 0 through this port, like it is just at the moment. Port 0 on the selector is port A, port 1 is port B, and port 2 is port C, and so on. So let's say we add 4 ports to this selector, and we'll plug our current count into the active port. You can see that will activate port D. As we lose lives, this will decrease the selector back to port A. So knowing that we'll have port D active when we have full lives, we can grab out some sort of indicator for our lives. And we'll just use a text displayer here, just with an emoji. We'll just use the heart. And we'll make sure we turn off the border and the background and all the rest. Just like so. Now we're going to need 3 of these, so I'll drag this up into its right spot first. And we'll copy this twice. And we'll want to make sure that the bottom one is the one that's furthest to the right. We'll also try and center them a bit. That will be close enough. So we know with port D that we're going to have 3 lives. With port C, we'll have 2, and with port B, we'll have 1 life left. With port A, we'll be completely dead. So knowing that, with port D, we'll want to activate all 3 of the emojis, or all 3 of the hearts. This will mean that we have 3 lives left. If we plug port C into only 2 of these hearts, the first and the second, then as we decrease a life, the selector will decrease to port C and leave only 2 text displays active. Using that same process, we can plug port B into only 1 text box, and when we only have one life left, it will decrease it to only 1. One thing we'll need to know is when our player has died. So I'll call this variable has died. And basically when they have died, we want to decrease their life count. Now we'll need some extra logic on the player here, but just one extra gadget. We'll just grab out a variable modifier. And we'll use the no health option here to set the has died variable to whether or not the player is dead. So when the player has no health, has died will be 1. When the player has health, has died will be 0 because they have not died. That is all that we're going to need on the puppet. Now back on our camera chip, I've just set up a really quick thing, very similar to our XP edition, that just continuously adds experience. This is just going to continuously take away health from our player. It's only a small amount, just 15. So you can see if we activate this timer, it will take away 15 health until the player dies. You can see this has died variable will turn to 1, which will decrease our counter or our lives, and this will decrease our selector port as well and only show a certain amount of the emojis. If we hop into play mode, you can see this in full action. He's losing health and dies and has 2 hearts, losing health, dies again, has 1 heart, losing health and dies once more, but does still respawn, which is not what we want. So we need something on the player to say when they're dead, don't spawn again. We'll just grab out a microchip to keep it tidy. We'll grab out a variable modifier to check our lives variable. And we'll just jump back to our camera chip again, grab out another variable and name this lives. And we'll use a variable modifier to make sure that the amount of lives we have is the same as this counter. So we want to continuously set the lives variable to whatever the value of this counter is. So you can see at the moment it's going to set our lives to 3. Then as we die, it will decrease it to 2 and so on. Now that we have our lives variable, we can use this variable modifier to get that value. We'll set it to the get option here. And we'll grab out a not gate and a destroyer. So we have the number of lives here, and we're going to plug this directly into our not gate. So basically, when there are not lives, destroy the puppet. And that's all there is to that. We'll just rename this microchip just to keep things nice. Health lives. And that's all there is to it. So we should be able to hit play mode now. And then when we've completely died, the puppet is destroyed and doesn't respawn. When the puppet dies, we might want to do something, so we'll grab out a timeline and plug that into the 0 lives port of our selector. We'll make this play once. And we'll copy our text displayer just from the experience microchip to keep it nice and consistent. And rather than saying level, it'll say you have died. Let's keep it at you have died, that's better. To make it not look too janky, we'll grab out a switch here. We'll fade this in quite quickly and out a little bit slower. And we'll just plug this directly into the opacity of our text. Just to make things faster, I'll decrease our lives to 1. Now when our player is dead, it'll say you have died. Now we'll be making a bit of a currency system. For that, we'll grab out, you guessed it, a variable. And we'll call this one currency. And we'll probably want some sort of a display for our currency as well, so we'll grab out a number displayer. And we'll keep our currency in the bottom right of the screen from the alignment page, so we'll just align this to the right bottom. just to indicate that this is currency as well, we'll put a $sign in the front of that. Now with our number displayer, we want to make sure that it's set to the custom horizontal alignment and vertical alignment, and we'll plug our currency directly into that number displayer there. Now for a coin, I'm just going to jump on the Dreamiverse and grab a coin, and I'll just show you a few things as well, maybe with this coin, that will help with optimization. So you can see here, this coin has an effect group with it, but if we were to duplicate this coin out, it would also duplicate the effects with it, which will increase our thermometer. So if we ungroup this effect from the coin, we'll grab that and we'll scope out by holding L1 and circle. So now we just have our coin in a group, which is perfect. We'll just open the microchip here, but we'll go through that in just a tick. So what we're going to do here is, rather than having this effect group with every coin, we're going to have each coin reference the one effect, so that we can just duplicate the coin heaps of times and each of them will reference this object, as opposed to having to group it with all of them. Now there's a few things we'll change here. This is a great coin, however, it is a little bit inefficient. So what we'll do, we've got a few extra things that we don't really need on here just to start with. So we won't use this collect variable modifier at all. We won't use this counter. We will use this sound, however, but we'll want the sound to be emitted with this effect here. So we'll grab out a microchip and we'll keep that sound around just on that microchip here with the decoration. I'll just select both of those objects and group them together. Scope in and open that microchip up, and we'll drag that sound just directly onto the effect. So now we've got those two objects grouped together, the sound and the effect. We won't need this signal manipulator either, or this coin collected transmitter. We'll also get rid of this NOT gate. Now this person has used a trigger zone on the coin to find out when the player is close enough to pick up the coin. This is absolutely fine, however, your trigger zones are limited. You do have a set number of them, so you should use them sparingly. Let's say we wanted to have 50 coins in our level. That trigger zone would be on every single one of those coins, so we'd have 50 trigger zones as well, which would decrease the amount of trigger zones we're able to use in the rest of the area. Instead, what we'll do, we'll make our own trigger zone, but instead we'll replace this with a tag, and we'll name this tag coin. Now on our player, we will copy our currency chip just down onto our player microchip down here. We don't need any of those bits, but we will need a trigger zone. This will be the single trigger zone that detects the coins, as opposed to the coins detecting the player. This trigger zone will set to detect a tag, and we'll make that tag coin. So basically, when the player is within this range of the coin, it will be detected. That tag being detected will send a signal out of the tag output port. We can use this signal to do a few things. We'll grab out an emitter, a destroyer, and a variable modifier. We'll turn all of these things on with the tag signal. So this will happen basically when the player picks up the coin. The destroyer will destroy the coin completely, because we don't want it to stick around after the player's picked it up. This variable modifier will set to add an amount of 1, let's say, to our currency variable. So every time we pick up a coin, it'll add 1 to our currency. Then finally, we've got our emitter here. We'll want this to emit our decoration. So we'll grab the object to emit up the top there, and make sure that we're scoped completely out and select the decoration with the microchip in it. Now we'll need to move the emit location to the center of the coin there, just like so. We'll set this to emit once at 0 meters per second, so it doesn't move, and we can emit an infinite amount of them, but we'll really only want this to last on the screen for about 1.5 seconds. This slider here saves us another gadget because we need a destroyer on each of the decorations if we didn't have this. That should be basically all we need. So back in play mode now, we'll go near this coin. Whoop, you'll also see that that destroyer did not destroy everything we needed it to. So let's jump back into this coin here, and we'll actually see that the microchip is not on the group, it's on the object within the group, which means it will only affect that single object. If we grab it and then press L1 and circle to scope out, and then stamp it to the group itself, then it will affect the entire object. So we'll play mode again, and you can see that's added $1 to our currency. We can duplicate this a bunch of times, head back into play mode, and that's working nicely. Let's say you were doing this over multiple scenes as well. We'd want our currency to stay persistent between those scenes. In the tweak menu for the variable, we'll turn on the persist in dream option. So if you have this scene within a dream, this currency variable will be carried over to the other scenes within that dream as well. This will mean you can take your currency to, let's say, a shop scene and spend your currency at a shop. Now for this, guys, we'll also be making a compass as well. This compass here I've just got made from 2 parts. So it's got the bit in the middle there that spins, and the actual bit on the outside as well. All I've done to group these two together is use a bolt. So if we turn on visibility here for connectors, you can see I've just got a bolt here. I'll recreate that bolt now with you guys just so you can see how that's done. You of course don't have to make it look like a compass at all. So I've just aligned the grid to this circle, so the center of the grid is direct center of the circle here. I've done that by holding down Shift and pressing triangle, and you'll hear that little noise. Now that our center is in the direct center of that circle here, we can grab out a joint and a connector, or a bolt. Now initially we'll want to hover over the bottom of the compass, or whatever you're making, and then we'll want to hover over the arrow of the compass so that it connects the child node to the pointer. That's all done, but this will rotate our compass in the wrong direction. So we want to make sure this purple part is flat so that our compass arrow rotates on a flat surface. If we turn off the grid here, we can give this another test. Let's scope all the way out. I do already have an objective tag here, so this is basically what we're going to use. So for the objective tag, we'll need to we'll want this compass to point towards that objective tag at all times. Initially, we'll group this compass with the camera block. We'll grab it, hold L1 and press X to scope in, and we'll put this down the bottom left of our setup and make it a lot smaller than it is because it will only need to be small. About like so. Let's just check that in play mode. Probably needs to be tilted back slightly. Then we'll need some sort of logic to tell this pointer to point at the objective. For this, we're going to put a microchip within the puppet group. This will mean that the microchip travels with the puppet, but doesn't affect it in any way. If you stamp a microchip to an object, it will automatically affect that object. As you can see, as I grab that off, the apply to object is plugged into the head because that's the last thing it was stamped to. We don't want this microchip to apply to anything. We'll open that up, and we'll grab out a look at rotator, and we'll want this look at rotator to affect the needle on the compass. So the affected object's output, we'll grab the label there and just plug that after scoping in. So we'll hold L1 and X, and probably once more, and we'll stamp that directly to the compass pointer. We'll grab out the grid and align that back to our compass again, and we'll just drag that needle out to point to the red side, so the red side will point to our objective, and we'll want this to look for the objective tag. We'll also increase the speed of this a fair bit. So now you can see when we hit play, our compass is pointing up, but as we head to the left, our objective is in the center of the map, so the compass will always point to the center of the map. It's not quite in the center, it's more at the back, as you can see. Now for the final part of our UI, we'll add a timer. So for this, the first thing that we'll grab out is a timer. And we'll also use our calculator to make sure that we never run out of time. We'll just have this calculator at a value of 1, and we'll grab out our current time. So we'll set our current time plus 1 to the target time. This way it will always stay ahead and we'll never run out of time. We'll also grab out a signal manipulator, but I'll show you why that is the case in just a moment. And we'll plug our current time directly into that. Let's say we also want to post our score as our time as well. So we'll grab out a score gadget and a score modifier gadget. So we'll set our score continuously to the amount of time that's elapsed. We'll also grab out a number displayer again. And we'll run that time signal from the signal manipulator into the number displayer. We'll have this up the top right of the screen. And we'll want to display this in a time format. So you can see if we hit play now, we've got our time up the top right there, and our score is updating to our current time. And let's say we want to post that score when we die. We can actually use the same microchip, the health lives microchip from the player there. So when there's not lives, we'll want to freeze this signal here. So we'll want to stop the time. We'll also want to post our score. And while we're at it, we'll grab out a keyframe here. So this keyframe is just going to have our number a little larger and in the center of the screen. We'll give this a bit of fade in time. And we'll also have that activate when our player dies. So we'll reactivate our little kill switch here, so that it takes health away from our player continuously, so we can see what this will do. Now guys, I've just realized that the "you have die" message is in the same spot as the timer ends up at the end of the game. So I'll move that up to the top like so. Now once we've lost a couple of lives, and we've completely lost all of our lives, the time will pop into the middle of the screen and freeze itself as well. So you can see our time currently is 12, but if we jump into the timer, it's actually at 16.2. So why is our display still showing 12? Well, that little freeze port on the signal manipulator will freeze the output signal, whatever it's being output at the time. So this means that the output will not change, even if the input changes, until that port is deactivated again. This will ensure that the correct score is posted and the correct time is shown at the end of the game. So guys, this is it with everything going. Hopefully I've covered all of the bits you might want to use in a UI, but if I've missed anything or if you've got any questions at all, definitely leave a comment. Don't forget to smash that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next one.